Okay, this is FRQ question number 2 for sensation and perception. This one is much different than the first as far as the general considerations and the fact that it's giving you a situation here, right? So here is the situation that you always have to keep coming back to. You can't just define now and connect the two. So the difference between question 1 and question 2 is that this situation, you have to put it into context. So going back to our DACE, we're all about connecting in this one and applying it. If you were just going to define, you would not score a point, and I'll show you that in the considerations. So you needed to look into consideration of the cocktail party effect. We have not gone over conformity or de-individuation. We did talk about figure ground and occipital lobe, procedural memory, or the sympathetic nervous system. We have gone over this, but this was in biology, so I chose to keep it out, even though we've done the occipital lobe. I will go over the answer for this one. All right, let's look at the general considerations for question 2. That is school-wide pep rally preceding a big game, so before a big game at William James High School. Each grade has designated t-shirt color and seating area in the bleachers. Student leaders organize classes so that their colored shirts combine to form the school flag. The coach gives an exciting speech, cheerleaders perform a routine, and the band plays a school song where the students sing in unison. That sounds just lovely, okay? General considerations, so check out these ones. Much longer than the first ones. Let's look at them though. Answers must be presented in sentences, so we have sentences again. Sentences must be cognate enough for students' meaning to be apparent. Spelling and grammar do not count. Within a point, students will not be penalized for misinformation. So for instance, it says, e.g., for example, the sympathetic nervous system increases heart rate, and then the sympathetic nervous system decreases heart rate. So see how those two counteracted each other? Those would not score a point. Bad, sad face. Too much information. Now let's look here at number 3. Students can score points only if information is presented in context. That's where that C comes in the DACE, right? Because the context in here is going to be your pep rally. You have to mention that they're at the pep rally. All right? This means that they must clearly convey which part of the question is being answered. For example, if a student correctly explains that during the coach's speech, a student hears her name called out in the noise and turns her head, but does not identify this as the cocktail party effect, the point will not be earned. Because there's too much going on. You can't just say that. You have to, this is why you guys are like, do I have to define it? Well, why would that hurt in this situation? If you define the cocktail party effect and then put an example to it, the point will be earned. Throughout the essay, definitions alone will not, without application, are not sufficient. So I can't just define. I can't just connect. I have to do both. All right, but definitions can establish or enhance the context for the example. So it's a good idea. Every point requires the student to relate their answers to the scene. They have to bring it back to the rally. The scenario is not limited to the activity, so they could say other things. But they have to address behavior or perception for each point. Examples provided for each are not to be considered exhaustive. Means that there could be more than what I go over. Okay, so those considerations are much longer. So if they ever give you a situation like this, make sure you're dacing, which is not a word, all right? Make sure you're defining, applying, and connecting here. So define, apply, connect. Because if you just define, you're not getting a point. If you just apply, you're not getting a point. You have to do both, and you have to connect it back to the context. Okay? All right, so the cocktail party effect. Let's see if you got a point. The example must demonstrate the ability to focus on one voice with excluding other noises. So I would score. Despite all the noise at the pep rally, the students could have heard his or her name said by one another, students, the bleachers. So, right, I was able to tone in on one voice and ignore the others. Okay? Despite all the noise at the pep rally, students could have heard his name by putting the bleachers down. Oh, that's it. So, sorry. So for this one here, you have to example much demonstrate for one voice. So you could say the cocktail party effect, so clearly indicating what you were answering, and then defining or applying it to that situation. All right, let's go down to figure ground. I know a lot of you guys had trouble with that one. Students must provide specific examples to distinguish between a figure and the background, labeling which is each. So you had to say which is going to be a figure and what is going to be the background, and then you have to label your example. So in this case, auditory examples will also score. So we didn't talk about figure ground for auditory. We just talked about sight. All right, so score. The school mascot stands out as the figure in his bright yellow costume against the gym floor. All right, so here's my figure in his bright yellow costume against the gym floor. I would have said ground. A student can hear the coach's speech against the background of crowd noise. So this is an example of audition. We didn't talk about figure ground with audition. We just talked about sight. So when I'm looking at figure ground and gestalt, I'm looking for you guys to talk about vision. All right, so anything where you clearly labeled the figure and the ground as apart from each other, that scores a point. All right, your occipital lobe. Students must establish that the occipital lobe is involved in vision. That's all you had to do. And then apply it to the situation. At the pep rally, the occipital lobe allows people to see each other. Wow. The occipital lobe allows the student to see the cheerleader in the performance. So you have to say that it has to involve in vision, and then you have to apply it to the situation. So see that there has to be a connection here. If I just said the occipital lobe, if I would have just said this right here, that would have not scored a point. Right? I had to connect it to my situation. Okay? And then the last part here, oh, I'm sorry, that would have been our last one when I told you I'm going over the sympathetic nervous system. So students must include a physiological component of the examples. So how does your sympathetic nervous system have to do it being at a rally? So anything that the sympathetic nervous system does. Remember, when you're sympathizing, everything goes up, right? Your heart rate, your breathing, all right? So you could say that students who have increased breathing, increased heart rate, pupils dilating, adrenaline is released. The word arousal or pumped up are not enough. Students must directly apply it to the body. So the exciting speech has caused the sympathetic nervous system to increase the heart rate. So see how it says the exciting speech? So this is where I applied it to my rally. With reference to fight or flight or arouse the body also score as long as they include the rally. Okay? So that's going to be the second part of your FRQ for our sensation and perception. Make sure you give yourself a score and then talk about why you didn't get the point if you did not.